Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. So today is Tuesday, the 4th. It is primary day. What that means in New Mexico is you get a chance to vote for your party to see who's going to run off in November for the actual election. For what they're worth, you vote, you do you. I voted for this primary. I voted on Saturday. It was the last day of early voting, and I did that mostly just to try to help out with the local elections. That's because I learned a long time ago that's the only ones that really matter. Especially after COVID, you really got to see the difference between local politicians and national politicians, and with the circus that the national political landscape is right now, I really don't care. Again, I think I'm talking to a lot of the same people that believe a lot like me. That's pretty indicative to the 2A community. We're kind of an echo chamber, so having a little bit of a different opinion is a little weird sometimes, but it's usually welcomed because that's kind of what we are. The 2A community is a great community. I worked my butt off today, not just at work, but I got off, and I've been inspired by one of my listeners and one of my really good friends to get back in shape because I want to do a couple hikes that are kind of important to me. One of them is to go to Zion, and there's three actually. One, to go to Zion, go to Angel's Landing. I've seen how beautiful it is. One of my friends, who's also a listener, he wants to go there on a bucket list type thing. There's also another hike in Zion National Park called the Narrows that I want to do, which is interesting because as a hunter, I don't know that I'm totally out of my depth going on these hikes because I hike a lot anyway when I hunt. That said, that's once or twice a year, and I've let my body atrophy trying to find work, as I was unemployed for a while there. And I got off of what I was doing, which is a Sonny Pazikis workout called the Gospel of Violence. And I've been able to maintain weight mostly. I've gained a couple more pounds than I wanted to back. So I was a little lighter than what I am right now. Not in a bad way. I mean, I'm within literally 2 pounds of where I was when I stopped the Gospel of Violence. So I've been able to keep those good habits going as far as diet. I need to get back in the exercise stuff and keep going forward because I need to build muscle to do these hikes. The third hike is going to Germany at some point in the next, maybe this year, maybe next year, for sure next year, if not this year. I want to get a picture or a piece of Edelweiss. If I can get a piece of Edelweiss, I'm going to get one. If you don't understand the significance of that, you haven't never talked to a German soldier or an American mountain soldier. Getting an Edelweiss patch shows that you're a pure mountain soldier. That's the best way to put that. It's also a sign of resistance back in the day to the Nazis at the end of World War II. But I digress. So what else is happening other than, that in the political space? Well, we actually have kind of an underwhelming victory to announce. It's been announced by several people, but it's kind of a big deal, especially for those of us that are behind the blue wall. So there's such a thing as permit to purchase. So Massachusetts, Oregon, it's been trying another way that the left, the radical left, I should say, is really trying to disarm civilians. And what this is you have to have a permit or a license to buy a gun. Now, they've tried this in New Mexico and it failed. The best they could do was get a 7-day waiting period when they wanted 14. We're looking at a special session where they'll probably try to do that same type of thing again. But the public sentiment has generally been in New Mexico that we're more ticked off about crime than guns, and that's really where we want you to focus. But we'll see what happens there. But in this victory, a Massachusetts man, he had a permit to carry, which gave him the right to purchase in Massachusetts. It was a permit to buy. He got caught in D.C., and where he willfully told someone that he was concealing a gun. They called the cops. They arrested him and put him up on charges for carrying concealed and all the fun that would happen in D.C. if you're caught with a gun, because D.C. is the most communist place on planet Earth, especially in the United States when it comes to gun laws. And that precluded him, or that excluded him, I should say, not precluded him, excluded him from getting his permit renewed in Massachusetts. So he raised a legal case against this, a lawsuit. And for 14 years he's fought it. Well, he won. This lawsuit went back and forth all the way up to the Supreme Court and came back, and he won. Now, why is that a bigger deal for all of the rest of us and, throughout the United States that aren't in Massachusetts? Well, it shows there's case law and case precedent. And if you don't understand what that is, it's when there's case law in your favor from another state, even if you live in a different state, it shows that the legal cases and the legal repercussions that are going there in the legal system are actually citing this way. And this is a result of the Bruen decision. The Bruen decision has a lot more impact when it comes to this stuff. And the gun grabbers are really aware of this. That's why they're trying to tie everyone up with lawfare. So, I think I'm preaching to the few guys that listen all the time. Thank you again. But I think I'm preaching to the wall here in one regard, that we've come to this conclusion a while back, that we're going to do what we're going to do. We're not robbers. We're not someone that's going to go out on a shooting spree. That's just not in our DNA. If you listen to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union, you're kind of probably one of those upstanding dudes that's just tired of the political system, and you want to talk about guns, you want to have fun. And I keep trying to figure out where to push for the gun stuff that you guys want to look at. And I keep going back to politics, because this was originally designed to stand up, New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union, that is, to stand up to the stuff that's coming in New Mexico, because it is time and time again, every time there's a tragedy where an idiot does something stupid with a gun, our governor goes after us. And if we're not internally vigilant about this and trying to raise a stink about it, it gets passed. And, if you don't believe me, look at what's happened with New Mexico laws in the past. New Mexico laws, the reason why we're having such a crime spree right now is because of bail reform laws that were put on a ballot. And I remember very explicitly voting against those laws that are on the ballot, but I could see someone not reading it and voting for it because it was very confusing. And that's what the left and what politicians do, is they want to keep you uninformed, so much so that you will willingly give up your rights. And that's where I have a hard problem with that, because, your right to self-defense, you are your own first responder, especially in New Mexico with response times where they're at, and the lack of law enforcement in general. Not that you should trust law enforcement in New Mexico 100% either. I've talked about this in depth because we've had people in New Mexico, specifically in Farmington, that got shot just for answering the door on a Wednesday at a late night with a gun because the cops got the wrong address and they killed this man. So I'm not saying that law enforcement is, infallible. In fact, I would say the problem is that they don't get enough training, they don't get enough funding. That's part of it. In New Mexico, that's a whole other issue. But you have to look at who they're attracting to their ranks. These are usually the kids that either have a hard law and order mindset, or they're the ones that were picked on in high school and are looking to grab power some way. These are not, some of these people, at least a third of them, if not half of them, are probably not the ones that should be in law enforcement, And I've discussed that with the sheriff in San Juan County, and he says that's absolutely correct, but there's not a way to correct for that because there's such a manpower shortage, and they're demonized as it is. And I understand the demonization. I understand both sides of this argument. If we did not have law enforcement, we would have a very anarchic society. And I'm not so sure that wouldn't be a good thing in some aspects, because I live in a very, very rural, very moral-rich area where someplace like Albuquerque or Las Cruces probably isn't so moral. And what I mean here is you could probably, if it weren't for the infiltrators and the idiots that are doing stupid things here, drugs specifically, that cause property crimes, you could probably get away with leaving your door unlocked for your car or your truck, or your house in Farmington, New Mexico, up until things have gotten way worse lately, And that's just because most people wouldn't go messing with your stuff. We have those turds just like everyone else does. And it's a sign of the moral degradation that's happening throughout the country. And how do you fix that? You really can't. Unless someone has the epiphany and had the upbringing that instills those moral foundations, or you find a religion or faith or whatever you want to call it, that's not something you're going to find in people. They're more likely to act out for themselves. And in rural America, I think the reason why that's less of a thing is we have to rely on our neighbors and our friends at times because we just can't do it by ourselves. And we're not meant to live alone. So we're not meant to be in our little bubble all the time, even though it's safe, and that's where we want to be. And I can say that because I'm one of those guys that's trying really hard nowadays to get out of my bubble that I've built for a long time. To that end, I'm willing to stand up on the soapbox and say, hey, no. I've heard, and it's a very common political statement, that we were given 4 boxes to control our government. One was the ballot box. One was the jury box. One was the soap box. And the last one, God help us if we ever get there, is the cartridge box. And with the demonization and the weaponization of law enforcement right now and fair in general, the legal system, you have to look at, are we getting close to that Civil War type thought? Because you're seeing people breaking down and actually having second thoughts about law enforcement in general, even on the hardcore law and order type, because you're literally seeing people imprisoned or thrown in jail for types of things that shouldn't be a problem, for speaking their mind, one, or for going to a rally to voice your opinion and it going sideways, but you getting messed up with that stuff anyway. Or that you're actually a politician who's trying to voice his opinion, whether you like it or not, and the opposing side doesn't like that. And you have to look really hard. I've had this conversation in my head, and I've thought about it a lot with my friends and my family. We've had these discussions. What happens if it does continue to get south? I don't think the left understands that the left likes guns just as much as the right does. They just don't vocalize it as much. And I would tell you that anyone who looks towards a civil war has never actually looked or studied at history. Civil wars are dirty, nasty things, and having one on American soil would be a bad plan, round 2, anyway, of that, because it would cause a lot of hate and discontent among the populace. And our government has become corrupt enough that I could actually see them using drone strikes here. And despite what we think, and it is a huge deterrent, that the American populace is armed to stand up against tyranny. So they would be facing, an army that is of insurgents, basically. And that's what kicked us out of Afghanistan, Iraq, and Vietnam. But could you imagine the shock and awe of them using a drone strike on American soil? What kind of hate and discontent that would cause in our country? It'd wake a lot of damn people up. And I mean those people that walk in lockstep that think this can't happen here. It absolutely can, and we saw that with the Summer of Love. And that's where a lot of us started having those really hard conversations with ourselves. So what happens if this goes this way? If our government becomes so corrupt, and we're getting there. I mean, if we're not there, we're seeing these idiots who march like lemmings to whatever tune the media tells them. And we're also seeing the reprisal of that. We're seeing the exact opposite of that. We're seeing people come towards alternative media like New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union and to talk about and hear from other people that are thinking the same thoughts. I'm not a fan of disruption of the life we have. The life we have is pretty good, even when it's not as good as you think it is, But compare that to someone in the Sudan anywhere else in the world, and you see that we are very blessed in the United States. How do we keep those blessings, though? That's the hard argument and hard thing to think around right now. My way of doing this is preserving the rights and speaking for anyone and everyone I can, and actually being willing to stick my neck out and say, hey, this isn't right. You trying to take away someone's rights because some other idiot did something stupid. It's like shooting the chicken because he saw the fox take another chicken. It's not right. It's not how the world is supposed to work. But as we've watched corruption invade those political spaces, we're consistently backed in a corner. And there will have to be a time where people have a hard thought. I think we're in that political realignment phase, and we're seeing a lot of pushback against the woke culture that has caused this fight. And I honestly believe it was because of communist infiltration back in the day. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but if you watch these idiots marching around protesting things like protesting for Palestine, what you notice is that was incited by Russians, it was incited by the Chinese, it's incited by our enemies. And the reason why they do it is it divides our country even more, and it divides the strongest political side right now, which seems to be the left, because the right is the party of nothing. This is why I left being a Republican, is because the right seems to, okay, well, just don't do that again. Just take that one part of that right away, but don't take the whole right. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts, and at some point, you have to realize the tactical situation and start adjusting how you're going to deal with that. And I think a lot of us have done that. COVID woke up a lot of people, myself included, from being a total statist. There was a point in time, it's sad to admit this, that I was a total statist. I believed that our government would not do this to its own people, and that there was enough military and law enforcement people that still had some character that would say, no, we're not doing that. And that's not exactly what happened during COVID. And if anything, you saw fear will drive people to do exactly what the government wants them to do. So I fully expect, the government to do something stupid again, and get everybody to march in lockstep again. It's come out, if you haven't been paying attention, Fauci has been before the House subcommittee talking about COVID. They put him on the carpet finally. And we all know that this is a lot of misinformation came out about COVID. A lot of it was skewed towards fear. A lot of it was skewed towards not finding originally where the problem came from. And a lot of that is centered around the information that came out. We literally found out that the federal government was hiding information from us and didn't want opposing sides to what the government narrative was. Welcome to the 2A fight, because we've been here for a long time. The government has said for years that an AR-15 is a machine gun, a killing machine, a weapon of war. There is no army on planet Earth right now that fields the AR-15. They filled the M16 or the M4, which is an M16 variant. The AR-15 is a civilian design, a civilian rifle, and in a lot of ways, I would say probably better and better maintained. At least the American civilian arsenal is better maintained than the military arsenal that our government has. To that end, that demonization, that weaponization, it's been used against advocates for the 2A for years. The NRA, for all of its warts, was part of the problem and part of the solution. They're the reason why we have things like the National Firearms Act, guys. And they are the reason why we can't own machine guns. But they are also the ones that helped train American people how to be good marksmen, good shooters, and to be safe shooters. They have, in the past, been advocates for gun rights, but they're also the ones that were allowing gun rights to be bled off and, that death by 1,000 paper cuts to happen. And nowadays, you're seeing the NRA come back and fight back. I think we're winning in a lot of ways. It's just going to take a lot of legal repercussions and a lot of lawfare to get there when it comes to the 2A. as far as the culture war type stuff, I think we're winning there too. It's just, there's one side that has the power right now, and they got to be fought, and the other side has got to be willing to fight, and a lot of them aren't. There's a lot of normies that tune into the news and think that's all there is to what's going on in the world. There's a lot of normies that dismiss conspiracy theory without actually taking a look at it. I dismiss conspiracy theory only after I've looked at it a lot. A lot of conspiracy theory and a lot of the right now is focused on China, that China is going to be this rising power that's just going to take us on, and they have space lasers and all this other crap. That's not a thing. If you look at what they're trying to do, they're trying to get Taiwan, and yeah, it would make sense to take us down, but they also don't have the population to support their economy, meaning that whatever they make, they have to sell. And the only economy that can buy their stuff is the American people. We're better served by buying American, and we always have been. That's something that we're just finding out now at a very high scale. We're seeing prices rise because, well, we're in a shortage economy, and the rest of the world has kind of had a shrinking birth rate. We haven't. We have several generations, the boomer generation being the largest, the millennials being the second largest, my generation being one of the smallest, and my kids' generation is the smallest that's ever been in the United States. So we're going to have some issues to deal with. But the simple fact is we have some time where the rest of the world, I don't believe, has it anymore. I'm hoping to get to Germany before their entire economy and demographic failure happens, because they are one of the worst in both of those categories right now, especially with the war putting on the heat with them right now. It's very possible we end up in a third world war. There's a shortage in the Western societies right now, Western civilizations, of nitrocellulose. That's the key component for gunpowder, or smokeless powder specifically. And the problem being is everyone in Western civilization is gearing up to help support the Ukrainians because we think we're going to end up in a war with the Russians or the Chinese. And if you look at pre-World War II, the same type of thing was happening. The difference is the American military and the American industrial complex propped up the world right after World War II, and we're pretty much, the American people said, that's it, we're done. Let the world take care of itself. We've taken care of it for 70 some odd years now. It's time for us to take care of American people. I wholeheartedly agree with it. These wars that are everyone else's problem, they are everyone else's problem, to be honest. Even the one in Israel, even though I hate to say it this way, and I personally don't believe it, is really everyone else's problem, not ours. That's me personally having a different faith, and being convicted in my faith, that I think we should stick with Israel, because to me, they're God's chosen people, and therefore we should defend them. And we kind of have a covenant because of our moral foundation was built on that here in the United States. But that's my own personal beliefs. I understand fully why people want to back away from the world, because we've propped it up for a long time. We've killed a lot of people. We've shed a lot of American blood to prop up other people's economies when we should be worried about our own. Propping up other countries, that's not our bag. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. So why are we doing it? So there's been a lot of soul searching for me, and that the only place I have a little bit of conflict in where I believe we should intervene or should do something is in Israel. Everywhere else, I pretty much don't care. I understand that we're trying to prevent a war in Russia by bleeding them dry so that they don't have a nuclear exchange, but that nuclear exchange would probably be in Europe. And I can't see Americans, even though we're bound by treaty to some degree, launching nukes at another country and annihilating them because a tactical nuke was used in Europe somewhere, especially if it was localized. If you back a bear into a corner, it's going to strike you, and that's, I think, what we're trying to do to Russia. And at one point, Russia's going to get wise to that. Now, as far as the Chinese, I look at that, and I think that we're looking at the wrong things. If you look at what the Chinese communists have done, is they've basically made an emperor out of Xi, and Xi is trying to run a population of 1.3 billion people. And if you've ever run any kind of business organization that's larger than 20 people, that's really hard to do if you are the single voice of reason, because everyone else has their own ideas and everybody else tries to do their own thing, and you kind of have to keep redirecting them back to the strategic goals you want for your organization. Could you imagine doing that for a country of 1.3 or 1.2 billion now? That'd be really hard. I mean, and if you paid attention during the COVID stuff and shortly after that, you watched the Chinese actually spray down runways with disinfectant to kill COVID. Okay, that says a lot about policy breakdown if you think about it. At least we didn't see that in the United States. The United States overreacted in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, I think it was our own fault because we funded the research that led to the COVID outbreak. But that's my own personal opinion. It seems to be being backed up more and more. What does it have to do with the 2A podcast? It has to do a lot with it if you think about it. We're in that weird place where we have to do some really hard, soul-searching things. You have to think, are we going to support the government that's doing the things that they're doing? I don't know that I can. I damn sure won't support them when they want to take away rights from anyone. And that's my hard line. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.